Have you ever wondered why narcissists seem to get upset when you remain calm and detached? It's not just coincidence or a simple misunderstanding. When a narcissist's need for control and validation is met with someone who refuses to engage emotionally, something happens. Their world gets shaken, their manipulative tactics lose power, and they're forced to confront the reality they've spent their entire lives avoiding. This is why narcissists absolutely despise Stoic detachment. In today's video, we're going to unravel the psychology behind this powerful dynamic and explore why staying emotionally neutral can be the most disruptive weapon against narcissistic behavior. Stick around as we dive into this fascinating clash of mindsets and the effects it has on both sides. Narcissism, at its core, is a personality trait defined by an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for admiration. Narcissists believe that they are superior to others and deserve special treatment. This mindset manifests in their relationships, work, and daily interactions. They have a constant craving for validation, often manipulating those around them to maintain their sense of control. At first glance, this may seem like mere confidence, but it's actually a fragile self-esteem built on the need for constant reinforcement. A narcissist's primary focus is themselves. They view the world through a lens that places their needs, desires, and opinions above all else. This self-centered worldview often blinds them to the feelings or needs of others. Empathy, for a narcissist, is often a foreign concept. They may appear charming or charismatic, but this is typically a facade used to gain admiration or manipulate others. Behind this exterior, however, is a person whose self-worth is largely dependent on external validation. When this validation isn't readily available, they can become frustrated, angry, or even hostile. Their relationships are rarely healthy or genuine. To narcissists, people are tools to either elevate their status or reinforce their fragile ego. They thrive on attention, praise, and recognition. If these things aren't forthcoming, they will often resort to various tactics to get what they want: guilt-tripping, gaslighting, or creating conflict. These tactics help them maintain the illusion of control and superiority. In essence, narcissism is a way of life that revolves around self-interest, validation, and dominance. To understand why they struggle with Stoic detachment, we must first grasp the depths of their dependence on emotional reaction and admiration from others. Stoicism, unlike narcissism, is a philosophy grounded in emotional control and rational thinking. At the heart of Stoicism is the belief that we cannot control external events, but we can control how we respond to them. This mindset encourages emotional detachment, not in the sense of apathy or indifference, but as a means of avoiding unnecessary turmoil and maintaining inner peace. Stoics understand that true strength lies not in how the world affects us, but in how we choose to react to it. A key aspect of Stoicism is the practice of separating ourselves from external circumstances and recognizing that our happiness does not depend on others or on the outcomes of situations. Instead, it's based on cultivating an inner sense of virtue, wisdom, and contentment. This detachment doesn't mean shutting oneself off from relationships or feelings. Rather, it's the ability to navigate life without being at the mercy of others' opinions or actions. In essence, Stoicism teaches that we must not let the behavior of others, particularly those who seek to manipulate or control, dictate our emotional state. While a narcissist thrives on stirring emotional reactions in others to boost their own ego, a Stoic remains unaffected. A Stoic focuses on cultivating resilience and understanding that the only thing within their control is their own mindset. This ability to remain calm and composed in the face of challenges is what makes Stoicism such a powerful philosophy, especially when facing narcissistic behavior. Where the narcissist seeks to provoke, dominate, and receive validation, the Stoic chooses to remain centered, unaffected by the external chaos around them. This contrast sets the stage for a deep conflict, one that leaves narcissists frustrated and powerless when their usual tactics fail. For a narcissist, control is everything. It's not merely about commanding people or situations, but about having the ability to shape their reality according to their needs and desires. They manipulate emotions, actions, and perceptions to ensure that the world revolves around them. This need for control is rooted in an underlying insecurity. The narcissist's sense of self-worth is fragile, constantly threatened by the possibility that others may not admire or value them as they believe they deserve. To protect themselves from this perceived vulnerability, they seek to dominate those around them, shaping every interaction to reaffirm their superiority. When a narcissist enters a relationship or any social situation, they are often not concerned with the well-being of others. Instead, they are fixated on how they are seen, what they can gain, and whether their needs for attention and validation are being met. The narcissist may use charm, manipulation, or even threats to maintain this power dynamic. Every interaction is an opportunity for them to assert control, whether it's through subtle gestures or overt demands. If someone challenges their authority or doesn't respond in the way they expect, they may quickly resort to tactics like gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or emotional withdrawal. This need for control directly conflicts with Stoicism, which promotes emotional independence. A Stoic's emotional stability comes not from controlling others, but from self-mastery. They recognize that they cannot change the behavior of others, and they do not seek to do so. Their power lies in their ability to maintain inner peace, regardless of the external circumstances. While the narcissist is attempting to mold others to fit their narrative, the Stoic remains unmoved, unaffected by the external chaos. The narcissist thrives on creating situations where their control is unquestioned and their status is reinforced. The Stoic, on the other hand, represents a challenge to this fragile power structure. Their refusal to be manipulated or emotionally drawn in disrupts the narcissist's sense of control. This silent resistance is one of the most frustrating aspects for a narcissist, who relies on emotional engagement and reaction to maintain their dominance. When faced with a Stoic, their usual methods of control lose their effectiveness, leaving them powerless and frustrated. The narcissistic supply is the lifeblood of a narcissist's existence. It's the constant flow of admiration, attention, and validation they require to maintain their self-image. This supply can come in many forms: praise, admiration, affection, or even conflict. The key is that the narcissist needs this ongoing feedback to feel important, worthy, and in control. Without it, their fragile sense of self begins to unravel. In many ways, narcissists are like empty vessels, constantly needing to be filled by external sources to keep their self-esteem intact. At the heart of this is the narcissist's inability to self-validate. Instead of finding their worth within, they are dependent on others' perceptions and reactions. They may go to great lengths to ensure that their image is carefully crafted and maintained, whether through social media, appearances, or their relationships. But the moment this supply is cut off, they are left with nothing to bolster their self-esteem, and their internal void becomes painfully apparent. For a narcissist, emotional reactions are particularly valuable. They thrive on the energy of others, whether it's the admiration of their followers or the anger they provoke in those they manipulate. A compliment from someone, the attention they receive in a room, or the ability to spark jealousy or insecurity in others all feed their need for validation. When they are able to keep people on edge or in a state of emotional turmoil, they are certain they are in control. A Stoic, however, offers no such supply. Where the narcissist expects emotional reactions, whether positive or negative, a Stoic offers only calm neutrality. The Stoic is impervious to the emotional highs and lows that a narcissist thrives on. Their ability to remain unaffected by praise or criticism makes them a void, a wall that the narcissist cannot penetrate. The Stoic does not feed the narcissist's ego, and this absence of reaction leaves the narcissist frustrated, unable to extract the emotional responses they crave. This is where the conflict deepens. For the narcissist, the loss of emotional engagement is not merely a missed opportunity for validation, it's an existential threat. Their entire identity is built on how others perceive them. And when that perception is no longer influenced by their manipulations, they are left facing a cold reality. The Stoic's detachment leaves no room for them to extract the supply they depend on, forcing them into a position of powerlessness. When a narcissist encounters a Stoic, their typical methods of manipulation and control lose their potency. Narcissists thrive on emotional engagement. They want to provoke reactions, stir emotions, and control the narrative. They often rely on techniques like guilt-tripping, flattery, or even emotional outbursts to get people to respond in ways that serve their ego. But when they are met with Stoic detachment, they find that these tactics fall flat. A Stoic's indifference to the emotional turbulence that a narcissist might create frustrates them to no end. While they might expect to elicit feelings of guilt, sympathy, or anger, they receive nothing in return. The Stoic's refusal to react, whether it's to praise, insult, or manipulation, creates an emotional void that the narcissist cannot fill. This lack of response is more powerful than any confrontation or argument, because it denies the narcissist the very thing they need most: validation. The narcissist may initially try to escalate their tactics. They might push harder, criticize more harshly, or resort to passive-aggressive behavior, but these attempts often only highlight their frustration. The Stoic, undisturbed, simply maintains their composure. This refusal to engage emotionally throws the narcissist off balance, as they are no longer able to manipulate the situation to their advantage. For a narcissist, this lack of emotional reaction is like being starved of oxygen. They need others to mirror their emotions in order to feel validated and powerful. When this doesn't happen, they begin to question their own worth. The Stoic's emotional neutrality forces them to confront the painful reality that their usual methods of self-validation are ineffective. This power shift is what makes Stoic detachment so unsettling to a narcissist. Without the ability to manipulate the emotions of others, their control over the situation and over their own sense of self begins to slip away. Narcissists, despite their outward bravado, are deeply vulnerable when they fail to get the emotional reactions they expect from others. Beneath the surface of their confident, controlling exterior lies a fragile self-esteem that is highly dependent on external validation. When a narcissist encounters a Stoic, this vulnerability becomes more apparent. The narcissist thrives on attention, whether it's positive reinforcement or emotional drama, because it feeds their sense of importance. However, when a Stoic refuses to react or engage in this emotional dynamic, the narcissist is left exposed, with no one to reflect their inflated sense of self back to them. This lack of emotional response from a Stoic is not just a passive indifference. It represents an active denial of the narcissist's need for validation. The narcissist expects others to respond to their provocations, whether it's with admiration or anger, because it helps them feel seen and validated. But when they encounter someone who remains unaffected by their tactics, it destabilizes their entire approach to relationships. In the absence of emotional reactions, narcissists struggle to define themselves. They rely heavily on the validation of others to reinforce their identity. A Stoic's emotional detachment removes that mirror, leaving the narcissist to face their internal emptiness. This vulnerability is a stark contrast to the persona they try to project. Without someone to feed their ego, the narcissist is left to confront the harsh reality of their fragile self-worth. The narcissist's reaction to this vulnerability can range from anger to confusion. They may feel threatened or disoriented, as the Stoics' lack of engagement forces them to confront their dependency on external validation. In the face of this emotional detachment, the narcissist's sense of superiority crumbles. They are left exposed, unable to manipulate the situation to restore their sense of power. This vulnerability is precisely what makes the Stoics' detachment such a powerful force against narcissistic behavior. It forces the narcissist to confront their own insecurity without the usual distractions or validation. For a narcissist, emotional detachment is not just a mere inconvenience, it is seen as a direct threat to their existence. Their entire sense of self is built on how others perceive them and how they can manipulate those perceptions. Emotions, particularly reactions from others, are tools in their arsenal, ones that they use to maintain control over the people and situations around them. When they encounter someone who refuses to respond emotionally, especially a Stoic, it threatens the very foundation of their ego. The narcissist thrives on drama, chaos, and emotional turmoil because these things validate their sense of importance. Every argument, every confrontation, every emotional reaction they elicit from others serves to reaffirm their control and superiority. The emotional engagement of others gives them a sense of power. After all, if they can cause someone to feel anger, guilt, or even love, they can manipulate that person to do their bidding. But when they face a Stoic, all of these tactics fail. The Stoic's emotional detachment creates a blank wall that the narcissist cannot penetrate, and this frustrates them to no end. This emotional detachment is a direct challenge to the narcissist's sense of self-worth. The Stoic is not reacting, not feeding the narcissist's need for validation, and not playing into the drama. To a narcissist, this can feel like a death knell for their ego. If no one is reacting to them, how can they validate their own worth? How can they continue to maintain the illusion of superiority if they are not being worshipped or acknowledged? The narcissist's reaction to this threat can range from confusion to outright rage. Without the emotional chaos to anchor them, they may feel lost, unsure of who they are. Their carefully crafted persona, built on the emotional responses of others, begins to unravel. This is when the narcissist's insecurity becomes most apparent, when their manipulation no longer works, and they are forced to confront their reliance on others to define their value. The Stoic's refusal to engage forces the narcissist to see just how empty and fragile their self-image truly is. This confrontation with their own vulnerability is what makes Stoic detachment so unsettling for narcissists. A narcissist's identity is not an internal construct, it is built entirely on how others perceive them. They see themselves through the lens of admiration and attention. Every compliment, every ounce of praise, and every sign of validation from others is absorbed and used to reinforce their fragile sense of self. This need for constant external reflection of their worth keeps them locked in a cycle of seeking approval and admiration. Their identity is unstable, reliant on the ever-changing opinions of others. Without this constant reflection, they feel disoriented, lost, and ultimately meaningless. This is where Stoicism becomes a threat. The Stoic is a person who does not rely on the perceptions of others to define their self-worth. Their identity is forged through inner wisdom, self-control, and a sense of virtue that is independent of external validation. Where the narcissist constantly seeks attention to maintain their identity, the Stoic has already found a sense of self that does not depend on the opinions or emotional reactions of others. The narcissist, when faced with a Stoic, is confronted with a mirror that does not reflect back their inflated image. This absence of feedback is unsettling because it challenges everything the narcissist believes about themselves. Their identity is shaken because without the constant reactions from others, they can no longer be sure of who they are. The Stoic's refusal to engage emotionally leaves them without the validation they crave, And this forces the narcissist to confront the reality that their sense of self is built on shaky ground. They begin to see that their identity is not as solid as it appeared, and the foundations that once held it together begin to crack. The Stoic, by simply refusing to engage in the narcissist's emotional games, exposes the narcissist's dependency on others to reflect their image. This challenge to their identity is one of the most destabilizing experiences a narcissist can face. For them, their sense of self is only as strong as the reactions they can provoke from those around them. Without this, they are left alone with the truth of their own insecurity and emptiness. The narcissist's sense of self becomes vulnerable, and this emotional vulnerability is one of the reasons they so desperately hate Stoic detachment. It strips away the mask they've spent their lives building and forces them to confront their deepest fears, that without others, they are nothing. Narcissists thrive on drama. They create it, feed off it, and use it to validate their sense of importance. Conflict, tension, and emotional upheaval are not just byproducts of their behavior. They are essential to maintaining their grip on control. In any situation, a narcissist will often try to stir up emotions, to create a sense of chaos that allows them to remain at the center of attention. This drama serves a dual purpose. It reinforces their superiority, and it keeps others emotionally dependent on them. When they create a crisis or provoke strong reactions, they feel powerful, as though they are the one orchestrating the events around them. For the narcissist, life is a performance. They need to be the star, the one everyone watches, reacts to, and ultimately admires. The more emotional the situation, the more they feel alive. Whether it's through manipulating someone's emotions, creating conflicts, or even stirring up jealousy, the narcissist craves this constant emotional engagement. It is this validation that fuels their ego, and without it, their sense of self begins to erode. Enter the Stoic. The Stoic, by nature, avoids drama. Their approach to life is rooted in peace, emotional control, and a deep understanding that external chaos does not have to disturb their inner state. A Stoic will not engage in the drama the narcissist tries to create. They will not react with anger, fear, or guilt because they understand that such responses only feed into the narcissist's need for emotional fuel. This refusal to engage emotionally denies the narcissist the very thing they crave: attention, chaos, and validation. The Stoic's calm presence disrupts the narcissist's carefully orchestrated performance. Where others might get caught up in the emotional whirlwind the narcissist creates, the Stoic remains steady, unaffected, and unshaken. This neutral response is the opposite of what the narcissist needs to feel in control. Without the drama, without the emotional reactions, the narcissist is left to confront the emptiness they are desperately trying to avoid. The more a narcissist encounters Stoic detachment, the more their emotional game fails and the more their world begins to lose its grip on them. The narcissist, accustomed to feeding off drama and emotional turmoil, is confronted with the stark reality that these tactics no longer work, leaving them frustrated and powerless. Stoicism is not just a passive response to the world. It is a powerful defense mechanism, particularly when dealing with narcissistic behavior. A narcissist thrives on creating emotional chaos and seeking validation from others. They want to control the narrative and provoke emotional responses that serve their ego. But a Stoic by nature is immune to these tactics. The Stoic's emotional detachment acts as a shield against the narcissist's attempts to manipulate, control, and destabilize those around them. By choosing not to engage emotionally, the Stoic denies the narcissist the very thing they need: emotional reaction. The narcissist seeks attention, admiration, and the power that comes from knowing they can provoke others. The Stoic's calm and composed demeanor prevents the narcissist from feeding off these emotional responses. Without validation, the narcissist's sense of superiority starts to erode as they are forced to confront the reality that they are not as powerful as they once believed. The narcissist's manipulations lose their effectiveness when met with indifference. This emotional detachment also serves as a form of protection for the Stoic. In relationships with narcissists, it is easy to get caught in a cycle of emotional upheaval, where the narcissist's tactics dictate the emotional tone. The Stoic, however, maintains control over their own reactions. They understand that their emotional peace is within their control, and they refuse to let the narcissist's games disrupt their inner state. This not only protects the Stoic from the narcissist's manipulations, but also helps them maintain clarity and perspective in challenging situations. In essence, Stoicism offers a form of emotional immunity. By refusing to engage in the narcissist's need for validation, the Stoic strengthens their own emotional resilience. The narcissist, used to having their way, is left powerless in the face of this calm and unwavering presence. The Stoic's detachment is not weakness. It is a quiet yet profound strength that defends against the emotional chaos a narcissist tries to create. It is through this emotional immunity that the Stoic can remain unaffected, while the narcissist's tactics fail to achieve their intended result. When a narcissist encounters a Stoic, their manipulation tactics often backfire, and this can trigger intense anger and frustration. For the narcissist, the inability to provoke an emotional reaction is a direct challenge to their sense of control. Narcissists rely heavily on their ability to create emotional responses in others, whether that's through praise, anger, guilt, or admiration. When these reactions are absent, their sense of power weakens and they are forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Their influence over others is not as absolute as they thought. This lack of emotional feedback is especially unsettling because it strips away the narcissist's primary means of self-validation. When they provoke anger, pity, or affection, they are receiving a reflection of their own perceived importance. But a Stoic's refusal to react leaves them with nothing to validate their sense of self. This silent rejection is often perceived by the narcissist as a personal affront. Instead of feeling elevated or empowered, they feel dismissed, invisible, and insignificant, exactly the opposite of what they need to maintain their sense of superiority. The narcissist may respond in a variety of ways, but one of the most common reactions is rage. They may become irritable, lash out, or attempt to provoke the Stoic further, trying to break their emotional resolve. The more the narcissist is met with detachment, the more they may escalate their behavior, seeking to provoke any kind of emotional response, even if it's negative. Their rage is often disproportionate to the situation, revealing just how deeply their ego is tied to the emotional reactions of others. However, this anger is not only a defense mechanism, it is a reflection of the narcissist's internal struggle. Without the constant validation they crave, their self-image begins to crack. They are forced to confront their deepest insecurity. Their sense of self-worth is fragile, and it relies heavily on others. The Stoic's detachment exposes this vulnerability in a way that no direct confrontation ever could. The narcissist's rage is a reaction to this exposure. And in many ways, it's an attempt to reassert control over a situation where they feel powerless. But the more they push, the more their behavior highlights their inability to manipulate the Stoic. The Stoic, unaffected by the rage, stands firm in their emotional resilience, leaving the narcissist with nothing but their own frustration. Over time, the effects of Stoic detachment on a narcissist can be profound. While the initial response from the narcissist may be one of confusion, anger, or even disbelief, the longer they are exposed to a Stoic's emotional neutrality, the more they begin to feel the erosion of their control. Narcissists are used to their manipulative tactics producing results: emotional reactions, attention, and validation. When these reactions are consistently absent, they are left to grapple with the unsettling truth that their power over others is not as absolute as they thought. One of the key long-term effects of Stoic detachment on a narcissist is the gradual destabilization of their self-image. Narcissists derive their sense of identity from how others perceive them. They need the admiration, validation, and emotional responses of others to feel secure in their worth. Without these constant affirmations, they are forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that their sense of self is built on shaky ground. The longer they encounter Stoic indifference, the more their sense of superiority begins to fade, as they cannot rely on others to prop up their fragile ego. This process can lead to a deepening sense of insecurity. As the narcissist's emotional supply dries up, they may begin to feel isolated, invisible, or irrelevant. In the absence of the validation they depend on, they may struggle to define themselves. This crisis of identity can manifest in increased irritability, desperation, or even despair. They may attempt to seek validation elsewhere, but the Stoic's indifference has already exposed the hollowness of their self-worth. In some cases, this long-term exposure to Stoic detachment can lead to a narcissist's eventual withdrawal. Faced with the realization that their emotional manipulation no longer works, they may try to find easier targets, people who are more susceptible to their tactics. Alternatively, the narcissist might attempt to adapt, seeking to engage with those who don't offer such emotional resistance. But for those who remain unaffected, the narcissist's power becomes increasingly diminished. In the end, the impact of Stoic detachment on the narcissist is a slow but steady erosion of their ability to control and manipulate. It exposes the fragility of their self-worth and forces them to confront the truth about their dependence on others for validation. The longer they are met with indifference, the more their sense of superiority weakens, and the more their emotional grip on the people around them slips away. This gradual decline is one of the reasons why narcissists find Stoic detachment so deeply unsettling. It strips away their armor, leaving them vulnerable and powerless in the face of their own insecurities. The journey of a narcissist facing Stoic detachment is not only a conflict of wills, but a battle for control over their own emotional stability. The longer a narcissist is exposed to this unyielding emotional neutrality, the more their manipulation tactics lose their power. Where they once thrived on drama, chaos, and emotional responses, they now find themselves standing in an emotional void. Their efforts to provoke reactions become futile, and their usual sense of superiority begins to erode. This long-term effect is not just about losing power over others, it's about confronting their internal emptiness and fragility. As the narcissist's control weakens, they may attempt to regain their grip in different ways, such as by becoming more aggressive, passive-aggressive, or withdrawing entirely. But these tactics are often driven by a deeper realization. Their emotional foundation is crumbling. The narcissist's identity, which once relied so heavily on external validation, is now exposed for what it is: fragile, unstable, and dependent on the reactions of others. Without the constant feedback they crave, their self-worth is called into question, and they are left facing the harsh truth of their own emotional fragility. In some cases, this confrontation with their vulnerability may lead to introspection. Although this is rare for a narcissist, the exposure of their dependency on others may spark a realization about the hollowness of their behavior. However, more often than not, they will continue seeking out environments and people that offer the emotional supply they depend on. For a narcissist, the pain of emotional detachment may drive them to isolate themselves or to push away those who do not feed into their narrative. But the longer they encounter Stoic detachment, the more they will find that their usual methods of control no longer work. For those around the narcissist, The effects of Stoic detachment can be a powerful lesson in maintaining emotional boundaries. By refusing to engage with the narcissist's manipulative behavior, the Stoic offers not only a defense against emotional exploitation, but a mirror that reveals the true nature of the narcissist's insecurity. The narcissist may not appreciate this challenge to their sense of power, but in the long run it is precisely this emotional resilience that can lead to their eventual decline. The narcissist may never fully change, but the continued exposure to Stoic detachment will diminish their ability to manipulate, control, and feed off the emotions of others. In this way, the Stoic's emotional strength becomes a quiet but powerful force against the narcissist's attempts to dominate. If you found this video insightful, be sure to subscribe for more content on navigating challenging relationships and maintaining emotional strength. Don't miss out on the next video, where we dive deeper into practical ways to protect your peace in a world full of emotional manipulation.